Hello everybody, thank you for joining us on this Instagram Live. My name is Helen Cowan, I'm the founder of The Tall Wall, and I am going to be joined shortly by my good friend and colleague Dominique Moss, who's the founder of the Return Hub. So we're just going to wait for Dominique to join, then I'm going to get her to introduce herself. I'm just going to view this request now, and then we'll crack on with our content. So hopefully it just takes a second and then she will join us.
Hi.
Hello, Dominique. Hi.
Hi, Helen.
How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Such a pleasure.
I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in a moment. And I'm just going to change my camera so I can see my top of my head. There I am. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in a moment. If that's okay. Anyone that's joined our Instagram Lives before will know all too well about what you do and what I do. But before we do that, I thought I would just set out what we're going to do on this call, what we're going to cover. Because this is a topic that we hear time and time again at the Tall Wall from clients, that is companies that we work with, but also individuals. So clients come to us and say, we want to find really diverse talent, and our usual recruitment consultants are not able to find us that diverse talent. What do we do? And then individuals occasionally who we coach will want to engage in a new job search, and lots of them will have never employed a headhunter or a recruitment consultant before, and they don't know where to start. And there's lots of myths surrounding that industry, and often I'm there dispelling those myths. So we can cover some of the basics of those two things. I think a lot of people will be enlightened as a result of this conversation. But Dom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Return Hub?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a headhunter for about 20 something years. I started my career working with one of the sort of medium-sized international firms, and I was there 13 years and left as a managing director and ran a practice group there, recruiting for most of the banks, or many of the banks, I suppose, at one time or another, placing people on the trading floor and salespeople and that sort of thing. And then I set the Return Hub up it's our 6th birthday. Thank you for your birthday message. That was really to fill what had become very clear to me was this huge gap in the recruitment and search industry. Headhunting is, there are lots of myths about it, obviously, but yeah, so we've set the business up to help all of those companies who'd been saying to me for years, how can you help us reach more female candidates? And all those brilliant women who have had a city career, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer, gone and done something else for a while, but when they want to come back, find it really hard to cut through those very traditional recruitment pathways.
Yeah. And having worked with you for those 6 years that your business has been going and my business has been going, I know that you're quite different to lots of other search firms that are out there. So I'm sure we'll come on to that in this conversation. Your values feel different, your approach feels different, and that's just been a joy to work with you in this time, just thinking about how you look after individuals and you look after the firms that are employing them. Tell us then, because the thing that I'm stuck on, frankly, I've never confessed this to you, and I know lots of other people are stuck on, is what is the difference between all these different terms out there to do with search? So you've got headhunters, recruitment consultants, executive search, they all sort of mingle into one. What is the difference?
Well, essentially, the main difference really is who the sort of main stakeholder is, or the main counterparty. So with a headhunter or a search business, executive search, headhunters, they are client driven. So they are working on behalf of their client, a company, to go and tap up candidates who perhaps aren't looking for a job, who are probably very happy and very well paid where they are, or they may be thinking, oh, maybe it's time for a move, but they're essentially in a job doing whatever it is they're doing, and a headhunter will come and tap them on the shoulder for a specific opportunity that might be the same job that they're doing currently, but maybe more money or a bit of bigger promotion or something like that, and will essentially try and move them into that new role. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, because the headhunter will go through a whole process of mapping a market. They'll go and find out not just the one person who does that job somewhere else, but they will produce a map of the market showing who does that job in that list of competitors to their client, and work out, how does that all hang together. There's a lot of market intelligence that goes into that. There's a lot of data that they'll get from that. There's a lot of information about the wider business and the whole context of that. And that's really where a headhunter or an executive search consultant comes in and adds value. A recruitment agent is much more candidate driven. So candidates can apply to a recruitment agency and be on their books, and that recruitment agent will try and find them a job with one of their clients, and it's a less high touch, more high volume process, and yeah, those are probably the main differences.
Yeah, and where does the return hub sit within those? Well, how would you term, what's the label you put onto the return hub?
That is the killer question, and we've been trying to find out a new word for it for about 6 years. Because essentially we do something very unique, and we sit somewhere between search and being a recruitment. I mean, essentially at our core, we are a recruitment business, but because we operate on a retained model with all of our clients, that's much more like a headhunter or an executive search company. And because we offer a very high touch service that requires a lot of expertise from our team at the Return Hub to know where is the bar for a mid and senior level candidate in this financial services industry, our offering is very much more akin to a search or a kind of consulting type proposition. But fundamentally, we get paid when we place candidates. So we sort of, and obviously we work very closely with our candidates, and we ask candidates to come and register with us, and we help them with their CV, and we help them with their LinkedIn profile, and hopefully offer some good care with them. So we sort of sit between both camps. Yeah. Postcards are what we can call that.
Yeah. Because it's almost like you're a matching service in some ways. You're getting people into the funnel, but you have clients at the other end, and those clients have set you a task of going to find fantastic talent, and you have a pool of talent that's coming in. Yes,
and frankly, search is really only really appropriate at that mid and senior level, just from a commercial perspective.
Yes.
It doesn't really make sense for a company to pay a search fee for someone at a very lower salary level, because the economics just don't add up. So you have, that's part of the equation as well.
Sure. How do you even begin to find a good search firm or recruitment firm? Because there are so many out there, and if you've got quite a sort of niche job, how do you even begin to find the right firm for you? And I think that often puts people off. I think I just don't know where to start, and I don't know anyone that recruits for X type of people that look like me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, Return Hub aside, and getting in touch with us, there's this Shrek firms, and those are the big global search firms. They've been in business 40, 50, 60 years, some of them, and they are Spencer Stewart, Hydrogen Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Corn Ferry, Egon Zehnder. Those are the big global firms that have big consulting practices. You've also then got the boutiques, and then you have the kind of one-man bands. And that's sort of how they work. And, one is not necessarily better than the other. One might have a particular individual who you connect with who might be a one-man band and very specialist in their particular area. I mean, I think what you really, if you're looking to speak to a headhunter and find someone, make sure they're a specialist in what you want to do. And, word of mouth is obviously fantastic. And also just think about the relationship as a two-way street, right? Because a headhunter, a search consultant isn't, this is going to sound strange, okay, isn't necessarily there to find you a job. They're there to find a candidate for their client, okay? So what we often hear is, oh, I went to this headhunter and they couldn't get me a job. Well, they're not candidate driven, they're client driven. It's really important to remember that dynamic. But what you can do is build a relationship with that headhunter that's very much a kind of two-way street, whereby you're perhaps giving them color on their industry, what the key themes are, what the key trends are, what's keeping their clients awake at night, helping them build a picture of what does good look like in their market. And you're on their radar, they've built a relationship with you, so that when that role does come up that's a good fit for you, and even if it's in 5 years' time, even if it's in 10 years' time, having that person in your network, or having those, maybe 1 or 2 headhunters that are in your network, will be invaluable. And not just for getting a job, right? There'll be all sorts of times when you can lean on that person that you have a relationship with for things like salary benchmarking, bonus benchmarking, what other market intelligence is going on the street, who's setting up what businesses somewhere else. All of that competitor intelligence will be bread and butter for a really good headhunter.
Yeah, and a couple of the most successful people I know do just that. So once a year, they go meet a couple of recruitment firms that they have, headhunter firms that they have had a relationship with for a long time, and they are specifically talking about what are the competitors doing, what roles are competitors looking for, what salaries looking like in the market, and they are just doing that. And it's a very honest relationship. They're not going in pretending they want a job. They're going in because they know one day they will move. It won't be now, but they are building relationship with this headhunter because in time that might immediately it will yield something in terms of market data for both sides. But longer term, it may be that individual wants to move, and that headhunter will be the first person they talk to. So that relationship, and I think people shy away from that. They think it's a sort of, you go to a headhunter only when you want to make a move in your career. And I think that's a myth that needs dispelling. Other myths that we hear, let's see if we can dispel some of these. So you talked about headhunter is there to find me a job. So you hear that a lot. I went to headhunter and they didn't get me anything. So not there to find me a job. Equally, they're not there to fix your CV. So I think there's understanding that I don't really have a CV because I haven't been on the market for 15 years, but headhunter will write it for me.
Yeah, no, they won't.
What can you do to get a good CV? Where would you send someone? I know you've got resources on the Return Hub website. Tell us a bit about that, but also where would people go to get a CV written?
Yeah, so there are CV writers out there, companies that will do. We work with some very good ones. City CV, set up by Victoria McLean, absolutely top-notch company. But when you think about how much work they take, how many hours it takes to put together a CV. I think it's like 8-9 hours something to put together a CV. So obviously it's something that takes real thought and consideration, and the style of it, and of course there's lots of templates on Google which can be a good starting point. And actually, even if you were going to use a CV writer, definitely get something down on paper so they've got something to work with. But actually, the benefits, I think, of having someone write it for you mean that you're asked the right questions to make you remember what your actual achievements are, which can only be a good thing when it then comes to going and doing an interview, because you've already sort of said it out loud quite a few times to somebody else. They'll help you keep on track with what a CV should look like. It's not what you've done, it's what you've achieved. That's, I think, probably one of the key things to remember in writing a CV. But yeah, Helen, as you said, we've got a whole suite of tools on the Career Academy on the Return Hub website, which has mini masterclasses on CV writing and templates and that sort of thing. But yeah, there are companies that you can go to help with that. But a headhunter is not one of them. Of course, if you send them a CV and it's not reflective of your abilities and your skills, they will tell you that, and they'll say, go away and have a think about it, and maybe add this and add that, and they'll do a certain degree of back and forth, of course, but they just won't have the bandwidth to take those hours to kind of to get that right. They will work with you probably to put together some kind of positioning statement for your CV if you're being put forward for a role. That's pretty usual, but fundamentally you'll be doing the hard work yourself. They'll be the sort of the check and balance, if you like.
That makes sense. And City CV, I would recommend that. I know colleagues that have used City CV and been really impressed with how they've taken their words on a page and really created a polished CV for them. Another myth that we hear is a concern that if I go to a search firm, my CV will end up in all sorts of places. I share my CV, as flimsy as it may be, because I haven't had a proper go at making it look fantastic, but that CV will end up in all sorts of places, and I'm worried that people find out I'm going to look for a job.
Yeah, and that is a very, very real concern. And unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people out there who will just, I think, much less than it used to be, to be honest, much less than it used to be. But I can only imagine that it probably still does happen sometimes. I think the really key thing is to make sure you're speaking to someone in a reputable firm who's got a good reputation, who's got a good track record, who looks professional, who can give you some assurance that they have that they comply with all the GDPR rules, because fundamentally no one's allowed to send your data, your CV, anywhere without your permission. So really what they should do is ask for your written permission, even if it's just a quick response to an email, before sending your CV anywhere. And then it's up to you to make sure you keep track of where your CV has gone. Because of course, the other thing from the headhunter's perspective is wanting to represent a candidate into one of their clients, sending over a CV and getting a response back, we've already seen a CV, which makes everyone look like a bit of a blonker. So
Yeah.
you know, and that is not going to get you to any headhunters, because they'll think, oh, that's burnt a bit. I'm not going to, where else has it gone that we don't know? So definitely keep track of where your CV has gone and make sure there's a kind of written record of it, so you know where it's gone, who it's gone to, when it went. And then, of course, you can follow up with the headhunter or directly, or whatever it might be, whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I can understand how that still happens sometimes, but I think the importance of finding the right recruitment consultant or search firm that abides by some very strict codes of conduct feels important. The other one is that there's a worry, if I contact a search firm and have a conversation with them, they will not leave me alone, and they'll just keep on ringing me. I imagine really good search firms, if they're too busy, they're not just going to keep ringing candidates because they've just got too many other things going on. Am I thinking that?
I think it depends. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think that's more probably, I can see that maybe more with a recruitment agency type approach, where they've got to fill a role and it's time to hire, and they've got 3 agencies all trying to fill a role and all desperately trying to get there first. I could kind of see how that would happen. But with the search business, I mean, their time is pretty precious. They're very deep dive. It's a very deep dive market intelligence. They've got a lot to get around. I think unless they really think you're a serious candidate or you can help them with something, I mean, they're probably more likely to call to ask for information rather than necessarily, can you be a candidate of mine? And to be honest, if it doesn't really cost you anything to share the information, I would share it, because it will come back in spades. And that might be, I don't know, it might be anything. Who did you used to work with, or who do you think is good at this, or what's happening in this market, or, as I say, what's keeping people awake at night in this particular area of the industry. Anything it might be, really. So yeah, you don't want to be bothered too much by annoying recruitment agencies, but then say that, say I'm not looking right now, I'll get back in touch in a year or 6 months, or I'll be back in touch with you, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So that's individuals. We've covered some of the myths, and maybe another conversation we talk about the whole process of what can you expect at every single stage of the life cycle of going through a search firm. But I'm wondering about organizations now. So if you are an organization, and I've heard this before, where I'd love to get your view on this, where as an organization, you've asked your recruitment consultant to go and get a diverse oh, Dom, have I lost you? Can you hear me?
Sorry, yeah, you're back.
Okay. So as an organization, and this is a horror story, so I've heard this before. We've asked our recruitment consultant, our headhunters, to go and find a diverse pool of talent, because we want, for example, more women in these senior roles. The usual recruitment firm that they use, the search firm that they use, it feels like the women are put on as a bit of a tick of the box at the end of the list of candidates. And the women are not necessarily comparable to the men. For whatever reason, it just makes no one look good. So there are firms that are clients that are frustrated. They can't access really good, diverse talent. And I just wanted to get your views on that, and what organizations can do to find the right search firm that's genuinely going to give them diverse talent.
I mean, there's no easy answer to this question. It's really difficult. I mean, I don't know whether anyone that's watching is interested in the Women in Finance Charter, but they've just released a few months ago the latest report on progress. So all the signatories have to report on their progress on achieving their goals set for gender balance at senior level, right? And last report was done by Bain. The results came through in the last reporting period. Amongst signatories, the progress was less than 1%. So this is not an easy thing. No one's doing it really well. It's really difficult. There is a lack of talent and there's a small pool, right? So it's companies that are finding it hard to access that pool of talent do need to look in different places, right? It's a bit like you know, you're going to the same headhunter again and again. It's like going to the same apple tree again and again, saying, give me oranges, apple tree, give me oranges. You know, and however hard you shake it, it ain't giving you any oranges, right? So you've got to go to the orange tree, you know, and that means looking in different places. And there is a pool of people out there, the returner pool, which obviously I'm passionate about, and the career transitioner pool, and those people who've gone and launched a fintech or been an entrepreneur, and taking into consideration all those different candidates that frankly are really difficult to find and assess. And as a company, if you're really, really serious about hiring diverse talent, you know, buckle up, because it's not easy. You know, and I've had a couple of potential clients call me and say, oh, you know, we want to hire diverse talent, but, you know, the CEO thinks it's going to be really tough. I'm like, yeah, if you're not up for tough, let's not bother. Because it's really, and not just tough as in for us to identify the talent, but tough as well for you to tweak your internal processes and get the mindset of your hiring managers to tweak a little bit too, and how are you going to interview them and what happens when they come on board. You know, that can be tough and a bit uncomfortable. And, you know, so, you know, if it was all easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation, you know. So I think that's the first thing companies need to do, is like look in the mirror about what are we going to do differently as well to receive these diverse candidates, or these different candidates. And, you know, it always sort of also makes me slightly smile thinking, you know, when a company is saying we can't find any diverse talent, and we look asking the headhunters to kind of go and look at our competitors to see whether they've got any diverse talent. It's a bit of a zero-sum game for the industry. You're just moving the pieces around the chessboard. But B, you know, those companies, you know, this slightly goes back to those companies saying, well, if you haven't managed to grow any of your own over the last 10, 15, 20 years, don't be surprised that nobody else has either, or that it's a very thin market. It's like, you know, it goes back to the sort of, you know, the yes, you can hire in diverse talent maybe if you're willing to, you know, to do the tough work, but also think about how you're going to grow your own organically and keep hold of them. Or maybe you're not going to keep hold of them forever. Maybe they'll come in and do 2-5 years, but how are you going to keep in touch with them after that? What about your alumni networks? You know, how are you going to make sure that you can recoup some of that investment that you've made in your people? They might have worked for you for 5 years, have a network there, know how things get done here. They might go off, get new skills, new networks, you know, even more valuable to you in another 5 years' time, and bring them back in again. So there's different ways of looking at it, but sadly there's no silver. Magic list.
I love the idea of looking inwards before you look outwards. Look inwards as to why maybe you haven't cultivated that diverse talent in all the years you've been going, and what maybe is going on within your organization that stops diverse talent from thriving. But then if you are going to go external, what are we going to do to ensure when that talent lands that we help them to be as successful as they can possibly be? Anything else you think organizations, clients should consider? And I'm just thinking about what you do, because I want to re-emphasize this, that actually what it feels like firms are doing is going around the same pool of very small talent, when actually what you're doing is going to a pool that no one taps. This is untapped talent often. These are people, women and men, but mainly women, let's face it, who have taken a career break or done something different and want to get back into the corporate world. It feels like that is completely untapped talent in the sort of wholesale system that we're talking about here.
I think that's right. And there's lots of myths about that talent pool as well, being out of date or out of touch. And actually what I find is that these are, I mean, certainly I can only speak for the financial services sector, which is obviously, you know, what I've sort of, you know, covered for the last 20 years, it's a pretty impressive bunch of people. You know, they're pretty impressive. In order to even get into that kind of industry 20 years ago, you had to have a top degree from a top university, be on the top grad program, you know, somewhere or another, and you know, work at some of the most, you know, I don't know what the word is, blue chip organizations in the world. So when you go and take time out or go and do something different for a while, so often they've actually been, okay, maybe they have been having a family, which is a jolly busy job in itself, but so often they've actually been doing other things as well. One of our recent candidates had done a cordon bleu pastry course and had been doing an internship in the Savoy at kind of 5 a.m. shifts. I mean, you know, talk about kind of resilience and learning new things and how to get on with other people and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's, you know, it's about thinking about this talent pool as an opportunity rather than as a, oh, are they going to be out of date? Oh, is their client base up to speed? You know, and all these reasons why not to hire them. And actually thinking, I bet there's some great talent in that pool, you know, let's see them.
Yeah.
Like
And we can vouch,
going away.
and we can vouch for the quality of that talent, because often we're coaching that talent going into new businesses, into your clients. You know, we're coaching these candidates who are absolutely phenomenal, and they're hidden often. Dominique, we could talk about this till the cows come home, but I think we're coming close to time. So I think this has been really fascinating. It will be really interesting for those organizations that don't know what else that they can do, but equally for those individuals who may have never used a headhunter or a search firm and just don't know where to start. So thank you ever so much for sharing your wisdom. Really, really appreciate it.
That's a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Helen. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Dominique. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.